Hello, everyone. Today, I will be presenting the paper, Plan Early, Revise More, the effects of goal setting and role of the feedback provider on feedback seeking. Gathering feedback on early drafts of creative work is very important. It allows content creators to discover conceptual issues with their work when the issues are least expensive to address. However, content creators often delay sharing early drafts of their work for feedback due to lack of commitment, the fear of criticism, and overestimating the development required to receive constructive feedback. Unfortunately, delaying feedback until work is further developed can also lead to narrow revisions and defensive attitudes due to sunk costs. For example, in this post to the R Design Critique subreddit, a content creator decided to post feedback at a later stage of the creative process. However, they received comments that indicated deeper issues, like this one, which states, "I think we need some other background options in the mix." But the creator did not seem too keen on addressing these feedback. So while there are many indicators and factors that influence feedback seeking, in this paper, we focus on how two factors, goal setting and the perceived role of the feedback provider, affect feedback seeking and revision behavior. The first factor we test is goal setting. This consists of 3 steps: set a goal, track progress towards the goal, and recognize the goal has been reached. Goal setting is an established approach for helping users achieve behavioral change in domains such as health, productivity, and learning. However, goal setting has been typically applied and studied in contexts where progress can be objectively measured. It has seldom been explored in contexts where goals are difficult to articulate and track, such as when deciding to seek feedback for a prototype. In this paper, we address this gap by demonstrating a user interface to operationalize goal setting theory for a content creator to set and track a feedback goal. To set a goal using the system we present in the paper, the user first selects one of 3 categories of feedback goal and then personalizes the goal. Next, as the user performs the creative writing task, the system shows the feedback goal they had previously set. A user tracks their progress towards the feedback goal by repositioning the marker on the slider to reflect their progress towards the goal. The second factor we test in this experiment is the perceived role of the feedback provider. Specifically, we compare 2 roles, supervisor and peers. Anticipating feedback from those with a higher perceived power, such as a supervisor, can increase the evaluation apprehension experienced by a content creator and the perceived impact on a creator's reputation when sharing early stage work. In addition, seeking feedback on early stage work risks social capital that may be needed later on in a project. As such, a content creator may avoid or delay feedback seeking from those with higher perceived power until the work is further developed. In this paper, we aim to answer the following research questions. How do goal setting and the role of the feedback provider affect feedback seeking for a creative task? How do goal setting and the role of the feedback provider affect the extent of revision and the quality of the outcome? And what kinds of goals do content creators write when planning feedback for a creative task? To answer these research questions, we recruited 245 participants for a 2x2 between subject study with an additional control condition. Over the course of the experiment, a participant will first set a feedback goal, depending on the condition they're placed in, write an initial story based on a visual prompt, get feedback on their story, and then revise their work. To start out, half the participants were randomly assigned to the goal-setting condition. These participants used the goal-setting interface shown previously to set a feedback goal. This step was skipped by participants in the other condition. Next, participants wrote the story. Participants were instructed to write a short story for children between the ages of 8 through 12 based on the image shown here. As they wrote the initial story, participants in the goal-setting conditions additionally tracked progress towards the feedback goal they had previously set. Participants in the other conditions did not perform the tracking. After writing the initial story, a participant submitted their story and completed a mid-task survey. Participants were notified that the revision task was available 1 hour after the submission of the initial story and were given 48 hours to complete the task. Prior to starting revision, participants who were in the feedback conditions received feedback from a peer or from the task requester, who was the supervisor in this case. Participants in the control conditions did not receive feedback, but were still required to wait 1 hour before being able to revise their work. Over the experiment, I collected and analyzed 3 categories of measures, including those to measure feedback-seeking behavior, revision, and goal attributes. In the following slides, I will focus only on a subset of these results, and a comprehensive set of results can be seen in our paper. The first interesting result is that an ANOVA showed the participants who planned goals wrote longer initial stories and perceived they developed the initial story more than participants who did not write goals. This result is contrary to our initial hypothesis that participants who set a goal would seek feedback earlier than those who didn't. One explanation is that goal setting increases commitment to the explicitly defined goal. As I'll discuss later, most of the goals written in this experiment were distant ones, where the participant indicated they would seek feedback at a later stage of the writing process. This may contribute to why participants who set goals perceive themselves to have a story that was more developed. Participants who anticipated feedback from a supervisor wrote shorter initial stories than participants who expected feedback from a peer, although this did not statistically influence their perception of how developed their stories were. Participants who expected feedback from a supervisor improved their story more during revision than participants who expected feedback from a peer. They also added more words to the story, although this is not a significant result. One interpretation of these results is that power dynamics led participants to seek feedback earlier from a supervisor and put more effort into revising their work. And ANCOVA also revealed an interaction effect between the 2 factors in terms of the revisions made. So let's focus on the revisions of the group that expected feedback from a supervisor. Participants here who planned a feedback goal added more words to their revised story than participants who did not set a feedback goal. You can see the opposite effect in the peer condition. This is interesting as it indicates the use of goal setting might reinforce some power dynamics to lead participants to revise more when expecting feedback from a supervisor. In a practical application, this result implies a student might revise more in response to an instructor's feedback if the student also engages in goal setting. The final takeaway is that planning a proximal feedback goal is important for prompting content creators to seek feedback on early stage prototypes and revise more in response to the feedback. This is consistent with prior work arguing that goals should be proximal in nature. However, the participants in the goal setting conditions gravitated towards planning distant goals, which prompt the opposite pattern. Participants develop their story further prior to seeking feedback and revise it less. In summary, our work makes 3 contributions to the CSCW community. First, our work contributes deeper empirical understanding, showing that planning a proximal goal prompts creators to share work for feedback at an earlier stage of the development process compared to planning a distant goal or no planning at all. Our results also demonstrate that feedback on a first draft is best provided by a person in a position perceived to have higher power, for example, an instructor or supervisor, because creators will revise the work more in response to their feedback compared to if they were given peer feedback. Lastly, we demonstrate how goal-setting theory can be implemented for planning a new class of goals, in this case, specifically feedback goals, that are difficult to describe, quantify, and track. Thank you all for your time.